I've got another 8 habits to share in my high value career habits series. Today we are going to be focusing on negotiating, how to negotiate, what to negotiate on, and also the lifestyle that you are building and leveraging outside of your 9 to 5. So grab a cup of tea and let's dive into it. I've absolutely loved making this series. I've already shared 24 high value career habits in episodes 1 to 3 of this series, and I'm excited to share the next 8 as well. As I shared back in episode number 1 of this series, these are the habits that I would share with the next generation in my own family. These are the things that I wish I had discovered earlier in my career. Unfortunately, was able to eventually learn these things through my own career, through mentors, and through thought leaders in these various spaces. So let's dive into habit number 1 for your high value career habit. The first is to negotiate a pay rise. In an earlier episode, I talked about the importance of asking for a pay rise and that men tend to do this more than women. And I think it was Michael Jordan who said that you miss every shot that you don't take. So that is why that is really important to ask. But it's one thing to know that you have to ask, but it's another to know how. So that is what I want to dive into for this particular career habit. Let's talk about how you can actually approach negotiating a pay rise. You need to prepare a proposal. You need to highlight the value proposition that you have in the organization. Sometimes when we work in a 9 to 5, it's easy for organizations to forget the highlights and the impact that you have had in an organization. So you want to make this really clear in black and white for your boss to be able to consider a pay rise. And I talked about in previous episodes the importance of tracking your highlights and key outcomes and also translating that onto your resume. Now, you don't need to have your resume as a part of your negotiation for your pay rise, but what it does is knowing those highlights puts you in a good position to prepare that proposal, to understand the value that you have brought to the organization in this particular role in your time with the organization. You also need to do your research. You need to know what is expected of someone who has your capabilities in the industry. What is the average pay that they are receiving, for example? And how does what you do compare to the pay that they are receiving? What is the difference? Are you actually on par and you don't realize it? Is there a significant gap and you can highlight why that is? You want to make sure that you are prepared and knowledgeable about the industry to put you in the best position to be able to have that negotiation to begin with. And the third thing that you want to do is make sure that you anticipate questions and comments and you are ready with your responses as well. For example, this might be, how much are you expecting? What extra value are you going to add to the organization if you were to receive this pay rise? How does this compare to your peers? Have you put that into perspective and understood the potential challenges or limitations that your organization might have when they compare what you are asking to similar roles in your organization? And how can you justify the difference that you are proposing? And finally, be prepared to answer questions about what you would do if you weren't able to get this pay rise. And what I also find is to be wary of the budget processes that organizations have, because usually your budgets are planned 6, 12 months, maybe even more, depending on your organization in advance. So when you are considering your proposal, consider the timing that you appreciate that your organization is potentially trying to work within. When you are negotiating your salary, this isn't just about money, it is about negotiating and highlighting your worth to an organization. But negotiating doesn't need to just stop at your salary, which leads into habit number 2, which is to negotiate on your title. Your organization might have limitations when it comes to their budget. Realistically, a lot of organizations are operating on really tight budgets, and they might not have the flexibility to be able to offer you what it is that you are hoping for as a part of your salary negotiation. But what often doesn't cost a thing for your organization is a change in title. So ask yourself if there is potentially a title change that could give you more leverage when it comes to your career. For example, if you are a marketing coordinator who is essentially doing all of the work of a marketing manager, but you don't have that title, then propose this as a promotion instead of just the focus on a salary. Because the thing about a promotion as opposed to a salary is that a promotion adds so much value to your resume and your LinkedIn profile. It shows that the organization that you work for values you, that you have progressed in an organization, that you have proven your abilities. And that can almost be worth even more than potentially the minimal salary increase that you are requesting. It increases your leverage going forward in the industry. But it's also something that is usually really valuable when it comes to just even how you can operate within your industry as well, particularly in relation to third parties. So this is where the importance of titles and hierarchy can actually come into play. For example, if you are negotiating with a third party, they generally are going to take you more seriously if you have manager in your title than if you are lower down in the organization. So don't underestimate the value that a title change can bring to your career. And this might not necessarily even be adding manager to your title. Maybe you already have manager in your title. This could be even things like proposing senior added to your title, or anything that just shows that progression that you are taking in an organization. Habit number 3 is to negotiate your responsibilities. And primarily what I mean by this in this case is to not negotiate away responsibilities that you don't want to have anymore, but actually focus on the responsibilities that you can add to your remit as well. Because what you are doing then is that you are upskilling yourself and you are increasing the value that you bring to an organization. So in my last episode on career habits, I talked about increasing your earning potential. And one of the ways that you do that is through upskilling or skill stacking. So coming up with the relevant combination of skills that is in demand in your industry. So for example, you might notice that a particular area of the business is under-resourced, and you can put your hand up to be able to lead that particular area. Or there might be something that you have noticed is an emerging trend in the industry that you see gaining traction, and you can propose being the one to champion that for your organization, because it means that you are making yourself valuable for where the future of your industry is going. But the point is to not just think within the scope of your responsibilities, because your responsibilities in your 9 to 5 can have a limit on the value that you bring to an industry. When I first started off in my career, one of my earliest titles, or my first title, was marketing and development. And as I progressed later in my career, it became even more focused on marketing and marketing management. And then eventually it also had communications added to that. And I had always looked after communications. I was editing magazines that were going to 10,000 people in my very first role, but I never thought about proposing having communications be a part of my title as well, which in itself just opens up a whole other field of opportunities. And as I continued to progress down this communications path, eventually I also became responsible for email marketing and social media and media. So by building that portfolio of skills, you become more relevant for more opportunities. You don't just have a hyper-focused skill set, but but you have something that could apply to more opportunities. And even if a particular organization doesn't require you to have that additional skill set, it might just be a bonus that they really appreciate that you are knowledgeable on as well. High value career habit number 4 is to embrace public speaking. The research shows that over 75% of people fear public speaking, and it was Jerry Seinfeld who joked, based on research, that more people fear public speaking than death. So if you are someone who is willing to embrace public speaking, so for most people this is going to mean overcoming the fear that you have in relation to this, that means that it puts you immediately in a minority. You are in the 25%. And what that makes me think of is a concept that really stood out to me from the book The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And it is this idea that success is simply being willing to do the things that other people aren't willing to do. And that is where I think embracing public speaking is something that is so obviously what people mostly don't want to do. So if you become confident in that space, or at least willing to put your hand up, willing to embrace it instead of hiding away from it, then you have developed a skill that is particularly really important when it comes to leadership. The more that you continue to climb the corporate ladder, the more being able to present and being comfortable with public speaking, whether you like it or not, is going to become an expectation of the role. So if you can show that you are confident or even enthusiastic in that space, then you can highlight your leadership potential in comparison to people that aren't willing to embrace public speaking. And speaking of leadership potential, this brings me to high value career habit number 5, which is to be a leader outside of your organization. How are you thinking outside of the box of your 9 to 5 to develop and showcase your leadership potential? For example, is there a community that you are a part of? Maybe it is a sporting organization or a hobby that you have, or something that you have some sort of affiliation to that has a structure in place that will allow you the opportunity to take on leadership roles within that organization. This might mean, and likely will mean, volunteering your time. So could you join a committee, for example, or is there a board that you have the right skill set for? To give you an example from my own career, after I finished my MBA, I joined the alumni committee for that network and immediately was assigned to running one of the subcommittees because it related to marketing and communications. And then eventually I was also able to become president of that committee as well. And what that did was it gave me an opportunity to build my leadership skills further, to showcase those skills to an industry, and to also demonstrate my commitment to a particular industry. So outside of simply focusing on your titles and your salary in your current organization, in your current 9 to 5, how are you leveraging the leadership opportunities that might be around you already? For these next few habits, let's shift into high value career habits that also relate to lifestyle. And habit number 6 is to build a portfolio career. This is becoming more and more popular, this idea of not just relying on your 9 to 5 job, but having multiple jobs, having multiple sources of income. That might be through things like a second job, through a side hustle, or through a business that you have. This is something that I've always done for the majority of my career. But when I was doing it very early in my career, just for the love of doing it, I didn't have the mindset that this actually relates really closely to the concept in finance of diversifying your investments. And that's just how I see this idea of a portfolio career now. It's not putting all of your eggs into one basket, because that really increases your risk. And when you spread out your investments, or you spread out your career into different opportunities, then you build your career resilience. You're building that opportunity to have sources of income that don't just rely on your organization or the place that you work for in your 9 to 5. So you know that for whatever reason, if something happens in your current role, you have other sources of income that you can rely on as well. But beyond just income, this also just develops you as a multi-dimensional person. You become more interesting when you're not just defined in a particular box. You expand your experiences, you expand your knowledge, and the more experiences that you have, the more valuable that you are going to be in your career. It was Steve Jobs who used to talk about this idea of dots and collecting dots, and that not enough people have dots to connect. And when you don't have those different experiences, that is where you come up with really linear solutions to non-linear problems. So people that have a lot of dots, that have had a lot of experiences, they're able to think creatively and able to provide these non-linear solutions to complex problems. So I'm going to guess what you might be thinking is, outside of your 9 to 5, where do you find the time to have a portfolio career or a side hustle or a business on the side? And that is where habit number 7 comes in, which is to leverage your after hours wisely. So I'm going to give you a couple of ideas of where you might be able to find some time that you maybe didn't realize was there. And the first one is television. The average Australian is said to watch 2 hours and approximately 45 minutes of television, and that equates to over 19 hours a week. So if that's you, or if that's partially you, that might be a space that you could find some extra hours. And that's not to say that you can't have any downtime, any time relaxing, watching Netflix, but it is about identifying that maybe there are a few hours there that you can dedicate to something else that is going to have a higher return on investment for you, that you might actually really enjoy doing as well, that doesn't feel like work. And the other space that you might be able to find a few more hours, which might be an obvious one, but maybe you didn't realize that it was this significant, is that most Australians will spend 2 hours a day on social media. So are you willing to maybe cut that down or cut that out so that you can dedicate those hours to building this portfolio career or upskilling yourself? This, when you think about it, combined with the TV watching as well, is a potential 30 hours in your week. And no one is saying that you have to work 30 hours on whatever your side hustle is or your portfolio career is, but it just shows you the scale of the opportunity that exists there to shift some of that time into something more valuable. And high value career habit number 8 is to join the new rich. Now, you might know what I'm talking about if you have read Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Work Week, when he talks about this idea of the new rich. So who are the new rich? The new rich are said to be the people who have unrestricted mobility. So they have the ability to not be chained to their 9 to 5, but can earn a great income but not have to necessarily do it while tied to their desk. And so to be able to do that, you need to be able to set up systems and processes that mean that you can achieve that. And this might be a priority for some people, maybe it's not for others. But if something like physical freedom is important to you, then think about how you are joining the new rich. How are you giving yourself unrestricted mobility? How are you building a lifestyle that allows you to have that physical freedom? And this is why having those systems can be really important. If you have created a business, for example, it is about how you can work on your business, not just in your business. So how are you creating those systems that allow you to earn money even while you're not necessarily at your desk? If you haven't already, then make sure you check out my previous episodes in this high value career habits series. Thanks so much, and I'll see you on the next episode.